Welcome to ExoNews TV. I'm Michael Sala. I'm delighted to introduce Scott Lemriel, author of the Ceres Agenda, to ExoNews TV. Scott's contact experiences are intriguing. He claims to have vital information to share about different kinds of extraterrestrial civilizations interacting with humanity and their respective roles in improving or manipulating life on our planet. Scott's book explains how advanced extraterrestrial technologies were used millennia ago to manipulate humanity by dividing our minds into conscious and subconscious segments. He explains how the subconscious mind was filled by implants carrying terrifying imagery and negative emotional charges that led to the division of the mind. In the modern era, this is known as trauma-based mind control and was pioneered by Nazi scientists and later refined by the CIA in MK-Ultra experiments that were exposed by US congressional inquiries in the 1970s. Scott says that this mind control technique was actually developed 500,000 years ago and used by negative extraterrestrials to subvert many worlds, including the Earth. In part one of this two-part series of interviews, Scott tells us about his own personal experiences of how a positive group of extraterrestrials called the Ceres began sharing with him information about the ancient mind control system introduced to our planet.
This whole adventure in this lifetime started for me, Michael, when I was about 5 years old, walking up the steps to my parents' brick house in Salt Lake City, Utah. And at that time, I had I would call it a very profound out-of-body, full conscious out-of-body experience. My parents were on the steps of the porch arguing. Just a normal human argument, nothing very violent or anything like this. But I could see their electromagnetic fields, I could see the colors of their aura, and between their two bodies, where this was a red sheath of energy, like a block between them as beings, and there were little red sparks coming off of that were very painful to me as a child when this experience opened up inside of myself. It caused me to leave my body, and I was suddenly aware that I was a mature male being, and I was looking down at this little body going, what on earth is going on? Up, and I saw a large sphere, a transparent sphere of golden energy above my head, maybe 4 feet wide, and in it I could see geometric formulas, mathematical equations, and the positions of the star patterns in the heavens. And I knew exactly from the star patterns where I was, and the thought that came to me was, Earth, what am I doing? This is how this started for me. And after maybe 10-15 minutes, I went back in my body, and much of this closed down for me for, I don't know, until I was about maybe 11 years old, living in Washington State, not far from Mount Rainier, at a time when UFOs sightings were taking place in massive numbers all over the planet, mainly because we started setting off nuclear bombs above ground. And at this time, there was I think a guy flying a Piper Cub somewhere near Mount Rainier that had photographed the first very, very accurate visual video of or pictures of a group or a squadron of extraterrestrial craft, and he coined the phrase flying saucer. And Michael, you probably know more of that history than I do about him. But this was at that time period. And I put it this way, I wanted to find out what beer tasted like. My parents drank. And as a young child, I thought it was very curious what they had this fascination about this thing called beer in cans. So I snuck out of my, got up at 3 in the morning and then got into my dad's refrigerator and took a can of beer, snuck out the bedroom window, and I walked across the grass, dew-laden grass, maybe at 3 in the morning. Beautiful, clear, star-ridden sky. Walked across the grass to a small, narrow lane that wound between the houses in a place called Cherry Crest, not far from Bellevue. And I popped the top of this can of beer and I was about to take a sip of this. And the next thing I knew, I was lying flat on my back, spread eagle, with the can in my left hand, opened, unspilled. And I was looking at a craft, a disc-shaped craft, perhaps 30 feet wide, pulsating from blue to white light. It was making no sound. I wasn't afraid. I had no fear or trauma of any kind. In fact, I got a telepathic impression that who was aboard that craft was human, highly advanced, not from this world, and very benevolent. And then a stream of went on for maybe 15 minutes. A great deal of information I didn't understand. I wouldn't have been able to use it at that age anyway. And then it stopped. The craft pulsated from blue to white light at a more and more rapid rate until it just became a blur of white light and shot up into space. I got up off the ground, looked at this can of beer, dumped it out, put it in the garbage, never drank it, went back and went to sleep. And that was curious enough. I never told a soul what happened. But later, I was coming home from a choir practice, and this bus would take us about 1.5 miles up this mountaintop where our development was, and drop me off at a wooden bus shed. And then it would drive down the hill a couple miles and vanish into the forest. Well, it dropped me off this one day about dusk. And I stepped off the bus and watched the bus drive down the hill until it vanished in the trees. I took one more step, and my head was pulled up, not by any kind of fearful thing or threatening force. And I was looking up into the night sky, maybe 5,000, maybe 10,000 feet up, it's hard to say. And I saw two groups of disc-shaped craft, the same one, same type that a week earlier. And they were in two triangular formations. And they just were sitting there. And I was mesmerized by this. And then the craft broke apart and did this incredible acrobatics in the sky for me. That's all I can describe it as. They did all kinds of maneuvers that craft on Earth cannot do. And then they regrouped and then just kind of tipped towards me. I didn't know what that gesture meant. And then they shot up into space. I walked home, I told no one. I never told a soul. My parents never knew about any of this. So I probably was a wise thing that, Michael, that I kept this stuff quiet at that time. If I had been talking about such things in those days, it would have caused a lot more problems for me growing up than I already had. That's where this began for me. Many, many years later, I was traveling in a car with a man and his wife and their new baby on a kind of a spiritual journey. And we were headed to the southwest United States, and we were crossing the desert, headed towards Salt Lake City. From Salt Lake City itself, but we were in the Salt Flats. And my friends of mine liked to listen to country music, and they had the radio station on a country station. And the next impression I got was of a benevolent being aboard a craft getting in telepathic communication with me. And he wanted to show us something. So I tapped my friends on the shoulder, and I told them I was getting a communication from somebody aboard an extraterrestrial craft. And they looked at me kind of spellbound, and we pulled the car off to the side of the road. The radio station by itself started blurring through the channels, and it hit upon a frequency of a communication between what was apparently some commanding general or officer at an Air Force base nearby and two Black Hawk helicopter pilots. And they were discussing the fact that they picked up something on radar, and this officer was ordering these men to go out and find out what it was. And all of us heard this through the radio station. Next thing I know, two Black Hawk helicopters, completely stealthy, no lights, flew right over the top of our car, headed out over the desert. And then I heard this voice tell me, "My name is Monka." That was his name. He says, "I want to show you something. Look out the front windshield up at the night sky out over the desert." So we did. A moment later, there was a brilliant flash of cobalt blue light, and it lit up the whole desert. And the next instant, it shot straight down into the ground as if this, whatever it was going to crash. Nothing happened. And we heard this commander at this base telling these Black Hawk helicopter pilots, and he was swearing at them. He said, "Get out over there and find that thing." So they flew over the desert and reported back to him that they couldn't detect anything. No wreckage. There was nothing on radar. And after that, the radio station blurred back to the country station. We looked at each other spellbound and then drove away. These are the kinds of things that started me on my journey into exploring contacts with beings from other worlds that are benevolent, mostly malevolent in my case, and the work I was later to do, which took 30 years until the time I'm talking with you right now. It's taken a long time for me to get prepared to do what I'm doing now.
Thank you, Scott. So you've described basically a range of experiences from sighting UFOs, out-of-body experience, and telepathic communications. And you said that you got the intuitive feel that these were benevolent extraterrestrials. Can you describe what makes you certain that they are indeed that?
Well, the only way I can describe it, Michael, is when you know something is with certainty. There's a certain fact of human beings that all human beings have the ability to plug into the universe through the pineal gland, the center of the brain, which is where they leave the body at night when they sleep. And they're able to plug into an omnipresent field of force or energy, be able to determine what truth is and what hidden truth is and what is going on in the universe for themselves. On Earth, on this planet where we live, this faculty has been largely, I should say, manipulated or shut down in people, or at least confused to the point that people don't know when they're using it, or they have doubt that when they're using it, they really are. To answer your question, when I had these experiences, I knew with certainty, complete certainty without any doubt, the beings I was in touch with were highly evolved, very loving, very advanced spiritually and technologically, and they made it clear to me from the beginning of each experience that they were benevolent. I always felt uplifted, a warm glow in my heart. I never had any or trauma, as you would if you were being abducted by a little gray or some other malevolent being that had ulterior designs on why they would be abducting a person. I never had those kinds of experiences. I was protected in a way. And I felt very fortunate for that. And for most of my life, I've kept quiet about these experiences. A few years ago, after writing what's called the Parallel Time Trilogy of books, which I'll be publishing the first one in May, I started to get the impression that I should sit down and go into a very deep contemplation. And I began to experience contact with an ambassador of a very ancient race. They're called the Seres, S-E-R-E-S. Very, very ancient, the most ancient benevolent race in all of the galaxies, really. Very few people in the UFO and extraterrestrial exploratory communities know anything about them. They were responsible for seeding humanoid life, many other types of life, the animal and plant life, into the lower worlds, both the astral and physical worlds, our galaxy, the Milky Way, Andromeda, and a number of others, a long time ago, and helping these races become spacefaring races, and then they vanished. This particular being made contact with me, and it was completely clear that his intentions were benevolent. He never forced a telepathic communication upon me. He requested it very humbly, and I accepted in the initial contact. When I started writing the series agenda, I had no idea where this book was going or even what it was for. But by the time I got into 4 or 5 chapters of it, it became very clear that my childhood experiences had something to do with them, and that I had a kind of protection taking place throughout my life that otherwise wouldn't have been possible for me to do what I was doing now. And so childhood experiences, I began to explore more thoroughly. And then I realized that through all the experiences I've had, including direct contacts with these beings, this was all some kind of a lineup that went very long ways. And I finished writing the first draft of the Seres agenda, and I was in the chapter where I officially introduced the Seres ambassador, Torellian, which is his name. It became clear to me what this book was for and what I was to do with it. Simply, I was kind of being guided to bring this book out to the public, to help people access purposefully hidden truth on a grand, cosmic, multidimensional scale, and to discover the much greater knowing of the expansive love that exists within the multidimensional universe, because it's clear to me that human beings have natural ability to know this stuff. But on Earth, through a lot of manipulation, misuse of astral technology, that ability has largely been shut down in people here. And here's the thing about technology, Michael. Anything that can be abused or misused to shut down a race of people can also be turned on the other way. It can be reversed. The technology to do that is not a problem for some of these races out in space. They've been at this for millions of years. And if they want to, and they have the will to come here and liberate a planet of people that are purposefully suppressed, they can do it. The real question hasn't been how to do it, or that they can do it, or have the technology to do it. It's been how to do it safely, to remove a tyrant influence that is entwined in a hidden military-industrial complex here that got created officially after World War II. Where we got this technology from today we're enjoying didn't necessarily come from the good extraterrestrial races. Mm-hmm. This goes back...
Well, Scott, so let's not kind of jump ahead too much, because I think it would be good to just kind of like spend a little bit of time just understanding the nature of this communication that you've had with Tyrellian, because it's very important for what you are about to kind of tell us and share with us. So you said that it was really a telepathic communication, that he kind of like requested permission to communicate with you. How did that happen? I mean, what was it? You know, what can you describe the nature of that telepathic communication?
Sure. This took place while I was writing the book. First through exploring my childhood experiences, and then through tracing like a golden thread through all of the out-of-body travels I've had all my life, and some direct contact experiences I've had with extraterrestrials throughout my life and through my 20s, 30s, 40s, and even today. And I had to understand a certain kind of thread of what all that had meaning for me, and what was that about? Why was this taking place? With Tyrellian, I actually met him on a number of occasions while I was writing the book. The telepathic ability to perceive him, or to discuss things with him, or to get some guidance from him, took place over time through the writing of the book. It took time to develop that. I had to get used to what it was like. I had to get used to trusting my own self in that communication more than him. The biggest problem wasn't the communication from benevolent beings, from other planes, or from extraterrestrial sources. It was the fact that people on this planet have been implanted the series of terrorizing images in their subconscious, what we call the subconscious mind, in the electromagnetic field that surrounds the human body, or in the aura. And these aren't the kind of implants that require a physical or type of electronic technology at all. All it requires is a very low frequency carrier wave, and then they can, it's possible to program holographic images containing sight, taste, smell, sound, tactile expression, visual, sonic, depth, width, and all that into that carrier wave. And in this case, they're artificially created terrorizing images that, when they're implanted in people, the person isn't aware it's being done, and they aren't aware of any sight or visual about the implant, only the feeling of it. So when people try to recover their higher nature or their higher faculties, they have a heck of a time on Earth doing it, because these implants will play on the nervous system, and the person's not seeing or hearing what they are, but they feel them. So it tends to drive a person away from really confronting what's below that subconscious area, which is where the real person is. Their higher faculties, their higher abilities to know truth, to look into the universe and perceive things directly without doubt. I mean, if you can keep a mass of people on a planet in doubt or fear, you can control them. You take a group of people on a planet that are liberated from having doubt and fear about their own ability to know something, you can't control them.
So I just wanted to get something clarified. So you began writing the Ceres agenda, and in the process of, I guess, inspired process of writing, you begin to get these telepathic messages from Tyrellian, and you said that you also met him. Now, were these out-of-body meetings? Were these astral, or was there a physical encounter?
Yeah, they're all of the above. Most of the work that is done with people for a practical reason, in my experience, Michael, is done on a telepathic basis or through fully conscious out-of-body travel, because it's just easier logistically for them to operate with us that way. If you would think about the logistics of what it would take extraterrestrial, highly evolved, benevolent, say, pilot of a ship to tune into one specific person living on this planet out of 7 billion and be able to coordinate them to get at the right place at the right time, maybe out in the desert, up in the mountains somewhere, and land that ship without it being detected by militaries on this earth or their alliance with other races that are not so respectful of human beings, and get that ship landed, pick that person up, take them off for a ride, maybe even de-implant them and bring them back. The logistics of that today is very, very, very difficult to do it safely. It's not easy as people think. There are many conflicting things going on this planet. It can be done, and from my source, it's going to be done a lot more in the near future for people as they can provide a safe way to do this. The main thrust of what it is that the Say rays and what is called the Galactic Interdimensional Alliance of Worlds, if you interpret it in English, what this huge organization of world systems out there is named. People call it federation, they call it, I don't know, conglomeration, all kinds of things. People out there really don't care what we call them, but they do have a more official name for what they are, because their organization involves a multi-dimensional or multi-parallel dimensional grouping of harmonized and benevolent working systems of people between a number of realities. This is not astral, this is still in the physical plane. And there are a lot of different parallel dimensions where worlds live and people live that are like our world or more advanced, and they have a trade and benevolent relationship amongst all these, because, you see what I mean?
Yeah. So when you did meet Tyrell, you described a number of ways in which you actually did meet him. Can you describe what he looked like? I mean, what were his physical characteristics, and how did you feel when you actually encountered him?
All too blissed out to be able to survive. The Say rays are so evolved to be in the presence of one is so uplifting, it can very much imbalance your physical life if you're not careful. So they're very, very cautious about how they approach a person. For instance, if a Galactic Alliance human from another planet, a benevolent human, met you or I would be greatly uplifted by their presence because, as I've discovered, they don't have a subconscious mind. There's nothing subconscious in them. The channel of the energy they radiate through them is much higher in vibration than ours and more balanced. So you naturally, as a human being on Earth, you would just be greatly uplifted. If they're benevolent beings, you're gonna feel very warm, very safe. They also have a little device they carry that suppresses implants from affecting your nervous system, so that when you do meet them, some of your higher faculties naturally surface to communicate with them without the fear or the trauma. This is really crucial, because people that have had experience with extraterrestrials who have a less than a kind regard for us, or really don't respect us, they would make the hair on the back of your head stand up. You'd get chills down your body. You wouldn't feel right. And they can't hide that. So when you meet a benevolent being, the way to look at the difference, for me anyway, between a benevolent being and a not so or malevolent being is simply the way you feel around them. Energies, there's no way negative energies can cover or mask themselves to make you feel uplifted. It's not possible. So they can smile at you, they can shake your hand, but you don't feel right. If they're a kind and highly evolved being who really regards you with respect, you're going to be uplifted, and you're going to know it. And this has been my experience throughout my life with them. This does not mean I haven't come across some negative ETs. I have, but they haven't been able to control or manipulate or suppress me. I've had protection in that regard that I'm extremely grateful for, because I know there are many people on this earth that have suffered greatly at the hands of manipulative beings. You know many stories from your researches, Michael, many people I know that have had very negative experiences along this line. So,
and how do you
Tyrellian is, if he stood in front of you, let's say you're out in Hawaii right now and you walked outside, say at that plot where you have planned to make a welcoming area of acreage where a UFO can land, let's say Tyrellians suddenly started to materialize in front of you, because that's how it would happen. They don't need ships to get around. They have them, but they don't need them. They're extremely evolved. The Galactic Alliance members normally use craft, but even they don't have to use them. They're very evolved. He would materialize like this. He would appear to you to be about 18 feet tall, which is quite tall. Human. He looks like a Greek god. Blue eyes, larger than humans, a little larger. Sparkling, radiant blue eyes. Long blonde hair. Slightly pointed ears. He looks to be, I couldn't describe him as Caucasian. I would say it's more of like a bronzed ivory colored skin. It's hard to describe what it is, but it's extremely pleasing. He's handsome beyond what most people would consider, just the radiation of him. He looks to be about 35. He wears a kind of a white tunic, simple, almost looks like silk, kind of a white gown pleated that goes down to just below his kneecaps, and simple sandals. This is a very evolved being. I mean, people would think of this guy as looking like something like Apollo or a Greek god.
Well, that raises the next question, then, which is that many different cultures describe these advanced beings, these kind of like gods, if you like, as in the Greeks or the Romans or the Norse gods. And we also have similar kind of cultural traditions in places like China, the Far East, describing these really powerful ascended beings who are, you know, similar to what you described about Tyrellian. So is this evidence, these ancient cultural references to the gods, is that evidence of the beings like Tyrellian, or are they references to, as some people say, kind of lesser beings or manipulative beings like the Anunnaki?
No, a lot of people don't know this, but the Anunnaki were reptilian. The symbols and the, Sitchin's work, you go back to a lot of these people's work in interpreting the symbols of aliens. They were reptilian, and their form is carved in the stones there. I mean, they were worshipped. They love to be worshipped as gods. They're very arrogant. They're 9 to 10, 11 feet tall, very powerful. You couldn't beat them in a physical fight. They are not respecters of human beings. They are a totalitarian race. They have a long dynasty and an emperor class. They love to manipulate races they either control directly or influence, like the tall whites and the small grays, for instance, that they use to get around the universe. And not all of them are bad, but many of the races have been conquered long ago and are under their domain, some of them. Now, I'm just talking about the few races out there that are totalitarian or imperial line bloodlines. Most of the races that I know about in the Milky Way galaxy, just 1/4 of it, are all benevolent, highly evolved spacefaring races that work collectively in one great organization. But not all of them are like that. And some of them that are totalitarian have very advanced technology as well. So they've had a treaty between them for 500,000 years since the end of the last great galactic war. And there has been a Cold War going on between them ever since, just short of going to war. And this Earth, this planet Earth we live on, has been caught in the middle of that. Under treaty, no one race has been allowed to own or dominate this world, because if they could have, they would have long ago. But they've been allowed to have certain pockets or bases in different places collectively on this planet, where they were allowed to do research, scientific research, but they were not supposed to interfere in the populace here. Now that treaty has been broken so many times it's not worth the paper it's written on anymore. And there's been a policing action going on where some craft have been shot down in our atmosphere, and our government and others have recovered them, but we did not shoot them down. 1947 in Roswell, we didn't have the technology to shoot down one of these craft, but they were shot, being caught doing some diabolical things.
So I think it's very interesting what you just related there in terms of some ancient cultural references to different types of beings. And we know that the Sumerians talked about the Anunnaki, and that, as you just said, that these actually were reptilian beings. And then we have the Greeks and the Romans and the Norse talking about their gods. Are they talking about the Ceres ETs, or are they talking about another category? And just kind of finally, we've got, recently you've had Marvel Comics come out with their series of films about Thor. So is Thor kind of like a symbol of one of these Ceres beings, or are we talking about another type of being?
No, I'd have to say no. I've just used the Greek gods as a reference for people who may have some way of looking, at these higher, beautiful, almost immortalized bodies, age about 36, tall. But the Ceres do not manifest, in my experience with them, they do not manifest any kind of haughty, arrogant behavior. They absolutely would not tolerate you worshiping them under any circumstances. They compel in the individual they meet a self-respect for yourself and for all life. They help bring that to the surface so that when you're around them, you naturally want to serve or create for the benefit of all that exists. There's no tyrant nature in them. I would say that they're beyond spiritual masters of what most people think of as spiritual masters. I would say they're a little higher than an ascended being, because they are so ascended they can manifest a physical body anywhere and talk with you, and you can walk up and touch them, but they're not limited to it or bound by it. From my knowledge, they immortalized their physical bodies over 1 billion years ago. It's one of the reasons they disappeared. Their return, I think this is the part of what I did with people, came about because they recently went through a higher spiritual consciousness change of their own. Something came into creation in very high dimensions of creation, something that hadn't existed before, that inspired them to want to take responsibility again for looking after the younger races who they had left on their own for a very long time. So the first group that they contacted was this Galactic Alliance Council in part of our Milky Way galaxy. And the presence of that being, who none of them had seen for ages, uplifted all of them. Within a minute, most of them were transformed in ways they really couldn't even understand, except their motivation was to start to do things that they had not considered doing before. For instance, come to a planet Earth like this one, it's in terrible trouble with all kinds of purposefully misdirected hidden leaders on this planet, wrecking this place, and suppressing technologies that would help us, cures for diseases, for an elite group, for themselves. Why would you come down and extricate this planet from this problem and solve it if you didn't believe in interfering in anything? There is a spiritual principle, I know you're very well aware of it, Michael, of non-interference. However, if it is understood by the races outside of this planet that Earth and its people aren't really operating from the true free will they think they have, then they're not really able to make the kind of decisions they should be able to make. So the first thing you have to do is find a way to safely neutralize this inability people have to know truth for themselves with a certainty. Somehow rehabilitate that, bring it to the surface. When you can do that, that person will naturally make a decision to cooperate with such beings in this world. That's the first thing they have to do. And that is a form of intervention, I agree, but it's a benevolent intervention, because if you look at it from their perspective, if 7 billion people live on this planet, and they're being misdirected subconsciously, and it's headed towards a destructive direction, and you do nothing to intervene in the fact that negative extraterrestrials have gotten in control here and influencing things, breaking a treaty just short of war, and that they are sore losers, and if they were forced out by battles or by war, they would lose. That's a fact, and quickly. But they would destroy this planet on their way out of town. They're sore losers. They like to destroy property that they're forced out from, and they've done it before in galactic history. So the real problem hasn't been saving this world, it's how to do it with the least amount or no destruction and death. And they needed to have a tool or a way to do this, not just about on Earth, but how to solve the tyrant problem out in the galaxy, there as well. because if you don't solve it there, it just comes right back here. So this is one of the reasons people are scratching their heads and go, why is it taking so long for these friends to come down here and help us? It's simply because they want to do it in a way that will liberate this world safely. And they're very careful about that.
Thank you, Scott. That's very important to kind of describe that, because I know that's one of the questions that I have come across again and again. If there are benevolent extraterrestrials, then why don't they just come in and kind of save us? And I think the answer you've given then really does explain why there is great peril in these beings who do want to help humanity evolve, suddenly appearing and basically using overwhelming force, what could still be done to the planet in terms of the destructive power of those kind of negative extraterrestrials that do have control. So, this information about the negative extraterrestrials, the reptilian extraterrestrials, how they've basically infiltrated and taken over the Earth, is that information that you were told by the Sarahs or by Tyrellian, or is this information you learned independently?
No, I learned this independently with New Tyrellian and others in the Galactic Alliance. When I went out, and I've been out a lot, to look at the way they look at this Earth from a perspective that has never been implanted, has never been dumbed down, has never had their higher faculties, which is a normal human quality. Normal human beings should be telepathic and clearly understand that's what they're doing when it's taking place, without doubt. They should have a photographic memory. They should be able to live for at least 1,000 years, up to 20,000, depending upon their mission and agreement in life. Human beings in other worlds that the people on this planet have been kept entirely in the dark about live this. And human beings that are on Earth today are not normal. They're not what they're supposed to be, and almost everybody, if you really get down to it, understands there's something not right going on here. There's something wrong. Everybody feels they just at the tip of finding something out that they can't quite touch. And it's in the subconscious, and these implants are in the way. So the Say rays and the races out there that are benevolent, that have gone through a consciousness change themselves recently, through a new liberating type of spiritual ray that never existed before. I can't put it any other way. Let's call it a conscious energy, if you don't want to use the word spiritual. And it has a certain quality or characteristic in it. And when the Say rays first experienced this, it brought them into a new consciousness to want to help again, to come out and actually set some things free. Because way back in galactic history, this thing we call evil, negative things and suppressive things and tyrant things and totalitarian things and imperial bloodlines, these things were never native to this planet. None of those things actually evolved here on their own. They were all brought here, imported from off-world, good and bad, throughout its history. People have been able to live here as human beings for over 50 million years, since the dinosaurs were extinct safely. There's a missing history on this planet that people who live here know nothing about, that is being kept occluded from their awareness. They're not aware of it. And they should have the right to be aware of it, and they should be aware of it. It's their history. Many people that are living on Earth today aren't even native to here. Many people were brought here under treaty as workers or slaves under certain groups to mine and to get minerals and resources off this world in their little pockets. They were allowed to have scientific research centers. And when they're done with them, tyrants aren't respecters of the human slaves they brought here. They just leave them. If the poles flip and the surface is destroyed, which happens every 100,000 years on this planet, just like clockwork, then those humans who ever live are left with shut down genomes on their DNA. Their higher faculties are shut down. They're not allowed to live more than 100 years because then they're controllable. And then those people maybe marry or have kids, as societies develop again, and their genes are passed on generation after generation for millions of years. That problem has never been corrected on this planet. This shutdown genome syndrome that people are suffering from, which it means, I think, as you know, Dr. Solovey, recently, fairly recently, mapped out over 1 billion genomes on the DNA, on the human DNA here on Earth, something like that. Each one of those genomes is a switch. And if you have the technology and you're more advanced and you understand the precise frequencies on or off that switch, you can selectively manipulate that DNA. For instance, you can turn one off that'll keep you from living 1,000 years down to 80 or 90 or 100 maybe, depending upon your conditions in life. Maybe not that long. You turn off another one, and instead of having a telepathic capability to reach out and know beings in the universe, we call it intuition. It becomes a subconscious intuition about things. It's not the conscious level, see?
So there's a lot of information there you've shared, Scott. So I'd like to just go back to the Ceres and they encountering this golden ray, this kind of transformative energy that suddenly starts appearing in the galaxy or throughout the universe. And once they experienced that, then they began this kind of mission to help transform worlds that had been overtaken by a kind of very dark or manipulative kind of extraterrestrial presence, as you described the Earth history. So is this part of what the series themselves embody, that previously that maybe they were more kind of indifferent or maybe non-interventionist, but after this kind of encounter with this golden ray that they are now kind of more inclined to intervene and to assist directly, and that part of the transformation is some kind of physical catharsis or some kind of physical interaction whereby this kind of golden ray energy is transmitted, which is what you describe in the book. Is that actually really the way in which the Ceres operate?
Yes, it is. And it's really the way the Galactic Alliance operates, most of them. Any of them that are actually members of the Galactic Alliance itself. Advanced spacefaring races in the physical universe and parallel dimensions, and the beings that they consciously interrelate with, Michael, from higher dimensions, ascended masters and masterful teachers. Beings on other worlds are not unconscious of these people. They have an open communication with this. They know. People on Earth are from, how the best way I'm putting it is, they're from all over the galaxy. You have Chinese, Japanese, Hispanic, African American, Caucasian, all kinds of different races here on this Earth. That from my explorations with the series and looking down the time track and looking at it from outside the vibrational trap of this world, is that none of the races ever evolved on this planet from monkeys, or because that's just theory anyway. Neanderthal became human and all that. Or out of the primordial swamp of this planet. First as fish, then getting on land and walking. That's all theory. It's nice. And that may have happened on other worlds in just that way. But human beings, from what I've been told and shown, did not evolve on this planet, ever. Every single human being living here was brought here from somewhere else at some time in the past and left here, in one series of scenarios or another. There have been wars on the surface of this planet that have annihilated the surface, never the planet. There have been polar shifts that happen regularly that wipe out most life on the surface. And then it resettles, and then it's reseeded or recolonized. And this has happened countless times. The ancient Atlantis, and then further back Lemuria and other cultures beyond that, those were just the last cycles of cultures that reached a certain peak and were destroyed overnight 100,000 years ago, like Lemuria or Mu. But there are many that go behind that people don't recall, that they were part of, that they lived in, here or on other worlds. Many other people, I'm sure you've come across them, when they're living their life here and they wake up to a certain point, they feel like they used to pilot a spaceship, or they used to be from the Pleiades or something like this. The odd thing about it is, they're right. They actually are. They just don't recall. They just kind of subconsciously, intuitively, they just kind of sense it. And this helps because it helps link them with beings who are benevolent from elsewhere. There is this vibratory ray that we talk about, this new ray, came into creation in what are called the higher worlds, beyond the void of the Buddhists. Many of the Buddhists think that this void, that it's as far as you can go, but there's nothing beyond it. But the fact is that there are many higher planes beyond it if you can get over the void. And in that higher area, there is an energy field that exists there. It's called pure positive. It's not made out of the dual current, positive and negative, that we have here to create these kind of forms. And beings have their origin there before they start coming down into the other dimensions to incarnate here on other worlds as a spacefaring race, as benevolent, maybe as a reptile, I don't know. People incarnate in different experiences in order to get enough knowledge and wisdom to one day become a trusted co-creator, not worker, co-creator with the supreme source of all life. Human beings have a far grander destiny, I've been shown clearly, than any of us know. A human being, when it's fully liberated and has got all its faculties back and can get in and out of their body at will and can go explore with these beings who are free to do so, begins to take on the godlike qualities of one thing, to use their imagination, the gift of their creative imagination, in only one way, and that is to create intentionally, whether it's inventions or things of science or medical things or healing, spaceships, travel between different dimensions. They begin to desire to create only for the benefit of all life, everywhere, not just on their own planet. That is the nature of the beings that I've met. They're like that. And when you get around them, you begin to bring your own nature, your true nature, to the surface. It's how they've affected me. I mean, that's what's come about for me.
It's very interesting what you've described, because it brings to mind a process which is very different to human evolution as we understand it, something that has evolved from very primitive life forms to modern humanity. There's Michael Cremo has written a book about human devolution, and he's based that on the Vedas, which I think is kind of closer to what you've just described, whereby it's not a matter of evolving out of primitive life into modern civilized life. It's actually more accurate to describe our modern society as a product of human devolution, where many of us have basically devolved from higher planes of existence to this modern reality, or to this plane of existence, and that this is how many of us got here, and why it is we have many of these kind of dreams and visions and about having lived in other worlds or in much better circumstances. And certainly that's something that I am familiar with in terms of my own dreams, how often I kind of like have almost like a behind the scenes or kind of undercover operative for an extraterrestrial race, that it's almost like that I come from somewhere else and have kind of like devolved from that higher plane of existence to this life here, where, you know, as we know, we are kind of largely unconscious of our true existence.
Yes, I personally don't, I understand where this person's coming from, and I agree with where he's coming from about the basic premise of it. And he's right, except I personally wouldn't call it de-evolution, because it isn't something you had a choice in. I mean, people want to blame themselves spiritually for being dumbed down on this earth because God did it to them. Well, God did it to them, but what God? Which race? Where were they? Many people on this planet, Michael, are political prisoners here, because if you can implant a being, you can capture a being out there, a diplomat or someone coming here to change the world or anything like that, and you can implant them with terrorizing images they're not aware of to control their direction in life, and put them on Earth with the compulsive order to reincarnate here unconscious from one life to the next, ignorant of everything that went before, one time after the other. You don't even need guard towers. You don't even need a race of police people policing the planet to keep people here. They'll do it to themselves. This is the problem. It's technology, but on a very advanced level that people on Earth are not accustomed to, that has been originally brought into creation to keep people from ever acquiring a subconscious mind. People in other worlds don't have subconscious minds. If you can create and erase a subconscious field of energy and put things in it, you can control them. And people aren't aware because it's subconscious. That is the misuse of a once benevolent technology that a planetary system created more than 500,000 years ago. That world was captured in a war, Their scientists were forced to bend this technology to implant people, to put them under a tyrant extraterrestrial control. This is what people don't get. Tyrant races out that are highly evolved, imperial bloodline races that want to control worlds, only do it for one reason. They want property, they want the wealth, they want the resources. They don't care about the beings. This is a problem because when you can implant people on a world anywhere and keep them from knowing who they are, where they came from, or where they're really going, you can keep that workforce mining. You can have a developed society. You can get all the mining out of the ground. You can get rare space minerals. You can get space technology. You can get resources that are used in space technology. You can ship water off the planet. You can ship platinum and metal off the planet in a classified program, and nobody will ever know it's being done. You don't blow up. You don't come here in ships and blow up the planet's populace. Why would you do that? If you can control, first, a hidden elite, arrogant group or family group on a planet that has been genetically manipulated with bloodlines for a very long time to be receptive to this, and you can control them first by implanting them, promising them rulership of the world, when in fact, when you're done using them, you would kill them. They don't know the jeopardy they're in. And then get them to control elected people from one regime to the next, one Democratic, Republican Party to the next, doesn't matter. It's a use of extraterrestrial technology to change a person once they're in the White House or once they're in some government. You notice how some people start off on this very righteous campaign to become president, and suddenly when they're president, they switch 180 degrees, and everybody sees it? That's because they're being manipulated subconsciously by handlers that wear a device on their belt. Push that button and that guy is going to start thinking. He's thinking his own thoughts after that, but he's not.
Scott, I just wanted to kind of get something clarified. Now, you said that this kind of implant technology was first developed by some off-world civilization, their scientists, half a million years ago, and it was used for the purpose of, as you described, of basically controlling, manipulating beings by creating a subconscious and then kind of implanting that subconscious with all of these terrorizing or fearful images that could be easily manipulated. When was that technology introduced to the Earth? And in particular, there are references to ancient civilizations on Earth like Atlantis, Lemuria, and so forth. Atlantis, a civilization that, for example, had this golden age, and at some point were they subverted by this kind of extraterrestrial technology, these kinds of implants?
Yes, exactly. I mean, this is not new. The technology originally was developed in a benevolent way. It was done by kind, highly evolved people who their desire was to create a way to keep people from getting ingrammatic problems in their subconscious or near-death experience, things that would traumatize a nervous system in a person, or body injuries. It was designed originally to keep people from getting anything subconscious that would influence clear thinking and clear decision making based on their spiritual being and their connection with the rest of the universe. You start manipulating something so that's cut off and a person's left with only themselves to make good decisions. It can't be done. They've got to connect into the whole universe to make the wisest decisions. We have that capability. All human beings do, but not if it's shut down. Originally, this technology was developed to keep people from getting a subconscious mind. A tyrant race captured them and twisted it to become an implantation subconscious control mechanism. And when they brought people to Earth over millions of years in different scenarios, good and bad ETs, the bad ones would bring their shut down human and other races here to mine to do the work. And they always implanted them and shut down their longevity, ability to have a photographic memory, shut down their telepathic function, so that they could have families and bear things and raise their kids and get more workers. So you don't come to a world like this and blow it into. You get control of a hidden group, they control the elected group, then they control the masses. Now you've got a workforce in place under a classified system that'll allow you to secretly ship off resources under a treaty to get the most antiquated extraterrestrial technology. That's how you do it. You don't want to blow anybody up. You just want to enslave them in a way. This is the way the tyrants, the reptilians, that's the way they work. They don't blow up planets unless they are in all-out war, like it happened 500,000 years ago. They lost that war, Michael. They were being influenced by an even more diabolical race back then that caused them to be the terrorizing beings they've become. It goes back a long ways.
Well, Scott, we are kind of coming close to the end of this part of the interview, so this will be the end of part one. So before we close and start part two, can you tell the audience where they need to go to learn more about the Ceres agenda and the information you've been sharing?
Sure. The Ceres agenda is published through a New York publisher. It's in its 3rd edition in just under 2 years. I'm going to put out a 4th edition in May, which will have a section in the back that has special techniques for each single chapter that people can utilize to explore purposefully hidden truth in a safe way, relative to truth that's revealed in each chapter. In other words, I want to provide them with the tools to be able to explore what's revealed in that book for themselves, to have the experience for themselves. It doesn't do me any good to tell people things about what truth is if they can't experience it. There is an ancient vibratory word that is not native to this planet, that extraterrestrial benevolent races use to stay in clear communication with each other through the pineal gland or link through the telepathic function, that cannot be penetrated by any negative power, being, or force. It was brought into creation at the beginning, and it's a fail-safe thing. When people become aware of how to utilize this vibratory word, it opens a safe door, a protected door through the pineal gland. Beings out in the universe that utilize this vibration pick up on it. It begins to make it possible for people here to get in contact with them, to have benevolent uplifting experiences, to have some of their memories come back about where they came from, how they got here. I've been through it, so I know. When I share this, I'm really serious about sharing it for the benefit of the people I share it with. It's completely sincere. This word is Hue. There is an organization on Earth that disseminates this, and they do a great job, but as I've said on radio and in person, they don't copyright, own, or possess, or patent this word. They can't. It's not native to this planet. And it's known as Hue. And when people do the Hue, like the old Om that came out of India, people used to do a meditation with Om. It vibrates the throat and chest area, this part of the body. When they do the Hue, it vibrates the head, Michael, only the head and the pineal gland upward, only. And you feel this when you do it. So there's a certain protection that comes with this that is important for people to find for themselves. It's not important for me to tell it to them, except if I can show them a way that they can have the experience for themselves. What's important to me. And it sounds like this. You. On the outgoing breath, or even silently in the imagination if you're riding on a bus. It still does the same thing. It begins a process where you're sending out into the universe that you want to meet the beings, cross paths with those beings, and have the assistance of those master teachers and benevolent beings who wish you well, who want you to recover from this trap here. And that is what it connects people into, and they find that out in time for themselves, so I'm not worried about the eventual outcome. It does work. They can get the book at Barnes & Noble or Amazon.com, through the website, through my website at paralleltime.com, PARALLELTIME.com, and then they can just click on there and it goes right to the publisher. I don't charge anybody anything for the book. I don't take credit cards at my website. That's done through the publisher. And they can get it that way, and I think that should help.
That was Scott Lemriel sharing the information he claims to have received from a benevolent group of extraterrestrials, the Ceres. In part 2, we learn from Scott what is happening in the post-Second World War era and how these two competing extraterrestrial groups have respectively intervened in the US, Soviet Union, and human affairs more generally.